So today I'd like to talk about source of information. In the recent weeks, much like the recent months, we have seen where the mainstream media and plenty of Trump's very own people come out and speak. His own constituency will come out and say things that isn't quite in line with what he has said, or they'll say things in a way which almost seems to remanufacture what he has said to meaning something different. For example, the last and latest, greatest event of contention would be this notion that we are now back in the climate accord for Paris, the Paris Climate Accord. But nothing's changed. I don't care what Mr. Tillerson has said. Actually, what he says, and I'll post links in the description box as always, so you can reference this as I go off on my little tangent. What he says isn't anything different than what Trump has already said. Okay, what he is just basically saying, he's basically remanufacturing the same thing, but he's doing it in such a way that one must almost question where his loyalties lie. Is he trying to make it look like Trump is now going against what he said? I mean, I don't know. I do know that the choice of words that are used is very specific, and you cannot discount that. When people use words, and Trump does this all the time, when words like should, could, may, possibly are used, these words are used specifically. It's not by accident. These are words that get them off the hook if they need to get off the hook, and sometimes they do. It's a way of having an open platform. Some may say that that is devious, but it's really not if you're paying attention, because when those words aren't used and then things aren't followed through with, then you can hold someone's feet to the fire, or so to speak. But Trump never disagreed or denied wanting to make some sort of negotiations in regards to climate control change, or whatever you want to call it. He is not necessarily a climate denier. To disagree with the bullshit that comes out of false studies, or studies that are so curtailed to spoon feed you a specific result, does not make one a climate denier. What he was suggesting was that negotiations have to be made and met so that it is beneficial for America. So when Mr. Tillerson comes out and says that, there's going to be some sort of working with the, proposition of the Paris Accord, and we're not pulling out of it, and then you have all of these people just like jumping off a cliff because that's their final straw. And believe me, I get that. I do get that final straw feeling. I think I went through mine earlier on. I went through mine earlier on whenever I heard Trump speak about not holding Hillary accountable. That's where my thorn is. That's where I feel that jab, because everybody has a different reason for voting for Trump. Okay, so to think that everyone voted for him that was solely based on the reasons of immigration, it would be incorrect. Like Miss Coulter, who I really actually have admired, and I think she's a very smart person. I think she's very well spoken and articulate. I think she presents herself very well. I find it interesting that the DACA and follow-up tweets from President Trump has her, the alleged pro-support for Trump from the beginning, that one thing, nothing else but that one thing, has her now over the edge to basically call for impeachment and say Pence would be just as good to replace Trump with now. There's something very suspicious about that. I don't know what I've missed before about her specifically, but I kind of have to discount her I used to think she was completely genuine. Truly I did. Perhaps I'm just naive. But I kind of push her out of that group now. There's very, very few people that I find to be completely genuine, that say and do things with nothing but their own good intentions. And even at that point, I give them the benefit of the doubt, like I do myself, for cause of room for error. But even with that, you know, Trump did say, and I would have to really kind of go back and study his words from months and months ago before election. Then it kind of gets more tricky to say, well, how much of what he said before he was president should be held to be accounted for, opposed to since he's been president, because, you know, someone could argue that that would be a little bit different. You can't really judge today on what he said necessarily before, when he was running, although others would say that's exactly what you should judge on, because this is what gives him this platform, right? This is what makes him the president of the United States right now, is what he promised people. But even now, for what he says, even now, whenever it's kind of gray areas, and there are so many, I think they're all gray, what I look at is action. And so my action, the action that I see right now, is that Hillary's walking around promoting a book deal. So, you know, I thought he was going to go ahead and put his people in position to go ahead and prosecute. Hadn't happened. Then I thought, well, maybe he's just saying, oh, they've suffered enough, but really on the back end, he's going to send his bulldogs out after her. But then the action is nothing's happening. And now that nothing's happening, I don't know if all of you caught it, but a few weeks ago, he had tweeted a couple things about Hillary and how she blames everyone. I mean, it might have been last week, how she blames everyone. I find these tweets that he puts out there like this to be just amazing. I think to myself, why is he telling us this? You know, like, do I give him too much credit? I don't think so. I think he's actually a pretty smart guy, which means that he has a purpose for putting that out there. Is it to stir the pot? You know, he's not the most mature person. There's a difference between being intelligent and being mature. And I think that there's an element about President Trump that isn't necessarily quite mature. And that's fine. You know, it kind of goes in line with his, you know, his real interaction with people. Part of the reason why he was voted in as president is because he can relate to people. Like, he's a real person. I think so. I mean, I think that's true. So for him to be immature, say things that are kind of otherwise a little off, that doesn't bother me. What I want to see are actions. What are actions? You know, even whenever actions are mentioning you're going to send more troops in, that's not really necessarily an action yet. Let's see what happens. If we had a funnel, though, like in all of those things that he says are spinning around at the top of the funnel, you know, those are just words and said, but they kind of wind down, and at some point they got to pop out. Whatever pops out are the actions. You have to see what the actions are. It's not just what people are saying, and especially not what the mainstream media is saying. You know, the mainstream media takes everything that he says, and they obviously twist it. And you have to learn from history. We know from history that the mainstream media will take something one of his constituents might happen to say, and then they'll flip it, and then they'll flip it back, and then, you know, someone might wonder, well, why doesn't Trump clear this up? He is one person. He's like one person doing this job and trying not to drown in a cesspool of piranha that are trying to eat him alive. I mean, I don't envy him. I do not envy him whatsoever, which leads me to just wonder, like, what's in it for him? He gives up his salary. Okay, he doesn't need the money, we say. People will say power. He already had power, you know. I'm sorry that I just cannot concede to believing that there isn't some sort of possibility that there is like a cabal behind him. Oh, I'm so glad when that geothermal unit goes off. I don't know if you can even hear it, but I didn't want to have to wait to put this video up together. Yeah, I'm not even really sure what, you know, cabal he has behind him, you know, pushing him to do the things he does. There's so much talk about Jewish ties, and, you know, I do not deny that for such a small percentage of overall population, what is it, like 2%, that there tends to be a lot of control by the Jewish community in banking, in politics. These are facts. This isn't based on bigotry. This is not based on hatred. This is not based on some sort of deep-seated issues that I have with anybody. That's just the fact, you know. I find it interesting, too, though, likewise, the United States of America makes up only like 4% of the entire world, yet we are involved in everything, you know. Sometimes I think that we are the Jews of the world. Other countries look at us like some people in America look at Jews. I just find it to be inaccurate and inappropriate in every way to look at somebody because of their race and think that that defines them. Now, when people do practice a certain religion and that religion dictates a certain thing, it's not like you're judging them based on their religion. No, if they're practicing a certain thing, that's what you're judging them on, you know. Okay, so I'm getting off topic with that. But just to go back to source is important. At this juncture, I am not listening to anyone except for what comes out of Trump's mouth or his Twitter. Everything else I will take with a grain of salt, and I will look at it like, okay, well, this is what could be coming down the road, you know, because you would have to think, would he really permit these things to be being said and not clarify it immediately if he were against it? Does he use that as a way to test the waters? Does he have some of his constituents actually present things in such a way because he doesn't want to do it himself, so that if it's favorable, then he'll come follow through with it? For as conniving or manipulative or strategic is probably a better word to use, that I can possibly think of his angle, I would like to think that him, in the position he is in, as the President of the United States, would outnumber anything I could think of and sharpen it by like times 1,000, or at least 100. You know, I would like to think that, because otherwise we're really going to be in for it. So I'm going to go ahead and post some links about what has went on and what has been said with Mr. Tillerson with the Paris Accord, and you know, maybe I'll go ahead and post some things about where Ann Coulter is coming out from. I just think that until we can actually see action, we have to wait, you know. There will come a time when action is going to be what occurs. There will be no more negotiating or talking about negotiating. And talking about negotiating and negotiating isn't the same as action. It's not. Action is action. And you just can't judge and believe anything the mainstream media or even his constituents say. This is true. Okay, that's it. I hope everybody has a great week, and be safe. We got more hurricanes coming on the horizon off the Atlantic. I think the hurricane season will be done in about, I don't know, maybe another month. Alrighty, bye.